Talking all things SEC football with our good friend SEC Mike, a.k.a. Michael Bratton of that SEC podcast. Mike, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. How have you and cousin Shane been thus far throughout this 2024 offseason?
Well, it almost feels like there has been no offseason, Chris, with just so much things going on. Nick Saban retiring, transfer portal, NIL. Hell, I mean, today, as we're recording, it's National Signing Day Part 2, I guess we're calling it, but not really, is it? I mean, 99.9% of the guys have signed, so it's kind of anticlimactic, but I'm sure as soon as things slow down, there'll be another, well, I mean, there's been scandals already. There'll be another scandal. There'll be another this. There'll be another that. There just doesn't seem to be any slowdown, and hey, I ain't complaining because that's great for guys like you and me.
Mike, I was about to say, if our last conversation is any indication, I think it was 24 hours later after you and I spoke that Nick Saban officially hung it up and you were asking me about him potentially retiring, what the reaction would be. Little did we know, right? It was going to be about 24 hours from the time we spoke. But you mentioned National Signing Day. Let's touch on that for just a second. Your thoughts on there being two separate signing days, and do you feel like they should consolidate it and make it one? Because to your point, I remember growing up that National Signing Day, this day in February, was like we all looked forward to it like Christmas, sort of like we do the early signing day now. And I remember the great commitment videos, the hat tosses, the guys waiting till signing day to make their picks. It really feels like this day in February has lost nearly all of that luster it once had. Your thoughts on signing day, and should they consolidate into one day? And if they do, would you prefer it be in December or the traditional February date?
Well, obviously, Chris, I do this for a living, and it was like yesterday afternoon, and then I was like, oh, yeah, it's National Signing Day tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, it just completely went over my head. Of course, I've been a little busy over here, just moved. But, yeah, I mean, there is no point to having two of them at this point. And I know why they moved it up. I thought it was perfect at the time, but that was before the transfer portal. That was before the expanded playoff. And I've been trying to wave the flags here, Chris, because I don't know if you're aware of this or your audience, but next year, National Signing Day is going to land at the same time as the first round of the college football playoff. So how in the hell is someone like, let's just say Kirby Smart, even though he'll probably be good enough, they'll have a bye. They won't be playing in the opening round. But let's just say George is there. I mean, they're going to have a game on Friday. They're going to have a signing day on Wednesday, Thursday. Like, it's not going to work for anybody. So I think they need to push the signing period till after the season, kind of like they used to do, traditional February. And yes, guys will enroll early. I get all that. So it may not be as good, but we just can't throw this in the middle of the college football playoff. It's completely nonsensical. I would also like to see them push the transfer portal window till after the national championship game as well, because it's foolish, and particularly to have free agency while the season's going on. And I think there's no better example than Texas had a backup quarterback, Malik Murphy, who jumped in the portal. He had an opportunity to win a national championship, but Duke was offering him essentially a starting role, and I guess he felt like they may not wait for him. And no player should be put in that position to where we may have. I mean, let's say Quinn Ewers got hurt, Malik Murphy would have been the guy to go in there, not Arch Manning. So it's just crazy that we're potentially taking the knees out of a national championship contender so that a guy can hit free agency while the spot is available to him. It makes no sense.
Mike, let's move into Tennessee versus the NCAA. What's the feeling around Vol Nation of what's going on with the NCAA? Obviously, we've seen kind of the fallout around some NIL stuff. I don't think the NCAA is worth the paper they write their name on. But what's the mood around Vol Nation, if you will, regarding the latest with this NCAA investigation?
That this is nothing and nothing to be concerned about, but that's basically always the case when someone gets notice of allegations from the NCAA. You just never know. And the NCAA is just, I think some people think it's like some cabal just sitting around in a boardroom, making decisions. But really, if it does go to an infractions committee, what that is a committee made up of different members, and they change it every time. So some people say, well, how did North Carolina get off and Wake Forest get hammered? Or I just made that up, but how insert team get hammered, but this team got off. That's how that happens because it's a different committee each time. Now we are a long ways off from this going to an infractions committee, but Tennessee certainly dodged a bullet last time. They could have got hammered for all the stuff Jeremy Pruitt was doing, and it's clear as day. Tennessee they were very transparent, and they helped the NCAA because they didn't want to pay Pruitt's buyout. They were ready to move on from him, and that worked. They had to pay, I think, $8 million in fines to the NCAA, but this time they're taking a different approach. They're going to burn it to the ground if they have to, and they're going to go. It's going to be a legal battle and all this. So I just don't think the NCAA really's got a leg to stand on because anything Tennessee, which here's the thing people don't understand, Tennessee committed no violations. They opened the doors to the NCAA and let the NCAA come in there. No coaches, no staff members, no administration, nothing. Now, who broke rules, which were not rules at the time? And it is not even the collective, Chris. People think it's a collective, but it's a marketing agency that works hand in hand with Tennessee's collective is called the Volunteer Club. Now, the marketing agency is Spire, and Spire's the one that gave plane rides to Nico and all this, which is at the time was not illegal. Now it is. So I don't know. I don't know how you could. I don't know how you put that on Tennessee for something. An agency that has no official affiliation with Tennessee did something wrong.
Mike, on that note, the SEC and Big Ten have joined forces. We're just getting the post pulled up here. SEC and Big Ten announced the formation of a joint advisory group of university presidents, chancellors, ADs. This was last week, but this all sort of goes hand in hand with, Tennessee and Virginia going up against the NCAA. Now this with the SEC and Big Ten. How close do you think we are from seeing the SEC, the Big Ten, maybe the Power Five as a whole breaking off and kind of giving the middle finger to the NCAA?
I mean, I think that may be coming at some point, Chris, but it's very complicated. Obviously, I mean, if they do that, there's no NCAA basketball tournament. There's no college World Series in baseball. You know what I mean? Like, it makes sense for football. Does it make sense for basketball, baseball, track and field, on and on and on? I don't think it does. But we all know the money maker's football. So there may come a point in time that we have to do that. But I think the whole point of this, and again, they're not calling it an alliance. That's a dirty curse word in college sports now, thanks to the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12. That alliance basically killed two of those conferences. But what this is, Chris, is just, the NCAA, for as long as it's worked, it's all the schools, doesn't matter the division, doesn't matter the level. And anytime you try to pass something that may work for the SEC, may work for the Big Ten, but doesn't work for the Sun Belt or the Mountain West, what have you, and even the lower levels beyond that, it just doesn't go anywhere. And this is the SEC and the Big Ten saying, all right, if you get on board or get left behind, and they're going to set their own rules. And if it doesn't work for everybody else, then yeah, I think we may see some kind of split. But I think it's very, very complicated, and I truly don't think the SEC wants to disband the NCAA because what it will do to the other sports. But if their hand is forced, I think they'll do it.
Mike, Missouri received an anonymous donation of over $60 million earlier this week. Your thoughts on that? And is it finally time, or does it finally happen that Missouri starts to gain a little bit more respect in the SEC? I always think it's fascinating that year after year after year, you have certain fan bases that want to view Mizzou as not really an SEC team or not giving them the credit they deserve. But after an 11-win season, beating Ohio State, a lot of that team is coming back. Eli Drinkwitz has been extended, and now this donation, I feel like a lot of folks have to come to grips with the fact that Mizzou is just as much a force as anyone in the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, I can't believe Cousin Shane was able to get that much money together to donate to his beloved Missouri Tigers. But
he nailed it, by the way. I will say, when I thought about Mizzou and what they were doing last season, I always thought there was one guy that I heard jump on that Mizzou bandwagon. So credit to cousin Shane.
Have you heard the popular rumor of who it really is that
I have
donated that
not.
money?
I have
And
not.
I have no clue that this is true. So this is just complete speculation. But there's the Walton family in Arkansas, which everyone assumes they're tied to Arkansas. It's my understanding they don't give hardly anything to Arkansas for the NIL or anything like that. And hell, they even have facilities named at Missouri for the Walton family because their ties are actually, even though the business is and all that is based in Arkansas, the guy that founded the company went to Missouri. So that's the rumor. That's why it's anonymous. By God, we don't want that to leak out that one of the families tied to Arkansas gave to Missouri. I don't know that that's true again, but that would be hilarious. That'd be the most
rivalry
SEC,
rages on. Yeah.
yeah, SEC donation of all time. But yeah, to get back to your question, I think this is what it takes to compete at the highest level in this conference. It takes all in. And this is just the latest sign of momentum. They just renovated the stadium about 4 or 5 years ago, I believe. So I didn't realize that the stadium needed $50 million worth of donations, but maybe it doesn't necessarily need it. But again, that it's just going to further Mizzou athletics. And 12 million of that 60-something million is specifically designed to go to their NIL to help the collective get more athletes in there. And we've been seeing it for a while, Chris, with Luther Burden committing, Williams Anawari, who everybody in the country wanted, committing. They just stole Caden Green from Oklahoma. I mean, Missouri's playing big boy football now. They just won 11 football games. I don't think Drink is worth $9 million, whatever they just gave him, but they gave it to him because he's taken them out of the wilderness and they want to stay there. And credit to Missouri because for about a decade, they've had to hear about how, why in the hell did the SEC add this program? They should have went to the Big Ten. They're stupid rocks, this, that, and the other. Well, they're getting the last laugh now because they're whooping all these teams' ass that mocked them for a decade. I mean, the only ones they lost to was Georgia and LSU, which obviously their quarterback won the Heisman Trophy. So, and if you look at Missouri's upcoming schedule, they're going to be favored in 9, maybe 10 games. I think they're going to have another 10, 11-win season, and they're going to be right in the playoff race all season long.
Mike, a couple of days ago, you dropped your SEC power rankings heading in the 2024 season. And of course, as we get closer to the season, I know that you'll update these probably post-spring, summer, right before kickoff, what have you. And if you guys want to check this out, at Michael W. Bratton, at That SEC Podcast, check out the show. You guys also talked about this. I'm curious, though, which of these selections or which fan base gave you the most grief for where you slotted them? And I got a follow-up question after that for a couple of these, but which fan base do you feel like gave you the most grief for where they were placed in your latest power rankings?
Yeah, you said I may update it. I may update it every week, Chris, just for the interaction alone. But no, I do that during the season, but I obviously won't do it that much in the off season. But yeah, a lot of grief from a lot of fans. But the two that I heard the most about, and not necessarily even the fans of where I rank the teams, but basically every other fan base. And there's two that stand out. Alabama, everybody's dancing on the grave of Alabama. I think that's foolish just because they lost some key components from last season's team and obviously Nick Saban. But I think Kalen DeBoer was as good a hire as they could possibly have done. And I think he's going to do great there. And then the other one is Florida, putting them, and hell, I put them at number 10. And everybody's saying, are you missing a 5 there? 15, 14. I mean, how in the hell can you be high on Florida? I think Florida is poised to be one of the surprise teams in the SEC. I think everybody's looking at the schedule and just saying, well, how can they navigate that? And that's not even how I do my power rankings. It's neutral field, team A, team B, who wins the game. But I don't know. I think Florida's going to be a lot better than people anticipate. I think they can get off to a hot start, getting Graham Mertz back. I know they lost Trevor Etienne to Georgia, but I think their running game's going to be fine. They've got some really great young talent at receiver. So I think the offense is going to be, just the steady improvement that we saw last season will continue. Now, The problem's the defense, of course, but it's year 2, Austin Armstrong. They added Ron Roberts, former defensive coordinator there at Auburn. He's worked with Billy Napier. He's worked with Austin Armstrong, the defensive coordinator. So as long as they can be average on defense, and that's, I mean, it's kind of sad that we're sitting here saying Florida, which is known historically for great. I know people think fun and gun and all that, but they didn't really win championships till they had an elite defense. And that under Will Muschamp, they always had great defenses. Jim McElwain with Muschamp's players, they had great defense. If they could just get average, I think this is, an 8-4 type team in the SEC. I really do.
Admittedly, Mike, it wasn't Florida that really jumped out to me personally. It was Alabama, though. I was surprised you had Bama so high, and we can talk about the Kalen DeBoer hire, and I agree with you. It's too early to dance on the grave or completely write Bama off. But I know you and many others have been enjoying sort of the downfall, if you will, of Alabama. I've spent some time talking to LSU folks, and I mean, my goodness, they're celebrating Mardi Gras all year long to celebrate, I think, Saban's retirement. But Bama at 3. So you feel confident that Kalen DeBoer is going to pick things up and do really well. We're not saying do as well as Nick Saban, obviously, but still be one of those top 2 or 3 teams in the SEC. You've got Georgia 1, Ole Miss 2, but there's Bama at 3, ahead of Texas, at LSU, of course, ahead of Tennessee, ahead of Mizzou. So you're buying Kalen DeBoer in Tuscaloosa and what he's going to do for the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, absolutely. My friend Dave Bartu, CFB Matrix, he charts all these coaching hires. He does it professionally for he has programs at every level of college football, including several in the SEC. He helps them with coach staffings and long story short, I mean, he has basically told me that Kalen DeBoer is, by his metrics, his grades, the best game day coach in all of college football. So again, it may be as shocking as it is to say. I mean, it may be just as good as Nick Saban on game day. Now, the rest of it, again, I'm not comparing him to the greatest of all time. That's foolish. I don't think he's going to win 6, 7 national championships or anything like that. But I think we're fine with DeBoer. And certainly, if Ryan Grubb, there's some consternation whether he's going to come or not. But if they manage to get Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator, Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator, those are 2 upgrades over what Alabama had last season. And you just look at what DeBoer did at Washington, where 12-2 against top 25 competition with a roster that is probably sub top 30 in the country. Alabama's got a top 5, 6 roster in the country, even with the defections they've had. I just think that, man, if that guy has done, he brought freaking Washington to the national championship game, beaten Oregon 3 times the last 2 seasons, beaten Texas with I hear their NIL is insane, like $12 million, number 1 in the country. He's beaten these teams. He beat Texas two out of 2 the last 2 years. I mean, this guy could coach with lesser talent. What's he going to do with elite talent? I can't wait to find out. I think I may have put Alabama 2. I considered putting them number 2.
And Mike, you look at the second half of this list, and you talked a little bit about the Florida Gators, and I'm actually kind of surprised to hear you say that. It sounds like you think they're going to be somewhat of a surprise team or breakout team. Who would be some other candidates in your mind, maybe top 2 or 3? Like, way too early. Obviously, I'm not asking you for predictions, but teams that you look at, you think the stock is low right now, that you could see them doing much, much better. I mean, me personally, I look at an Auburn, Hugh Freeze taking over the play calling. I think that one, though, is going to be kind of obvious. But you mentioned Florida. That one sort of surprises me a little bit at them. Is there anybody else that you look at and say, hey, watch out, they could surprise this fall?
Yeah, I think that team is Texas A&M, because I think a lot of people wrote them off, a lot of defections, a lot of the transfer portal losses they had. Not all, but a lot of them were backups. And they've added about 20, 25 portal additions to, which again, not a lot of those guys will be, frontline starters, I would imagine, year 1 in the SEC. But I would have to imagine they could fit in as quality backups. Now, they did land some key pieces like Nick Scrouton, I think is his name, the guy from Purdue, led the Big Ten in sacks last season. That's going to be potentially a frontline player for the Aggies. But you look at Mike Elko and what he did at Duke. I mean, he did one of the best coaching jobs the last 2 seasons in all of college football. I mentioned Dave Bartu in his coaching staffing and how he does that. He also grades these coaches. And according to Dave Bartu's metrics, Mike Elko's been a top 5 coach in the country the last 2 seasons, given what the talent he's had to work with, going up against the talent he's faced and the results from those games. So again, I'm not sitting here saying Mike Elko day one is a top 5 SEC coach. I don't think he's earned that, but I think he can surprise people. And clearly he knows A&M well. He's been there. They were dominant on defense when he was the defensive coordinator. If we can get closer to that, I love the hire of Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator. I think Texas A&M's got better quarterbacks than people realize. I think Texas A&M is another one that could be sneaky good this year.
Now, Mike, lately on you guys' show, you did hot seat ratings for each of the SEC head coaches. And admittedly, I have not gotten to watch that content yet, so this is going to be a lot of fun. But I feel like the most obvious going into this season, Billy Napier at Florida, Sam Pittman at Arkansas. Who are the not so obvious coaches that you think could find themselves on a boiling hot seat and maybe even fired at season's end?
Yeah, I think two that really stand out in terms of that question are Mark Stoops, who, again, I'm kind of down on him a little bit more than others. But would they make a move? I don't know, because they would probably owe him a ton of money. But hell, Chris, he tried to get out. He can't hire an offensive coordinator to save his life short of Liam Cohen, and Liam Cohen just left. So what? We don't even know what they're going to be on offense. Their end of the season was dreadful. He basically called out the fans for saying, "You need to give us more money because we can't compete at this level." I don't know. I just see things trending poorly for Mark Stoops. Now, does that mean they're going to run him off? No, I don't necessarily think so. But if they don't have a nice bounce back, I mean, I think there's a chance Kentucky doesn't make a bowl game this year. I really do. They catch Georgia early. They have a ton of away games this year. So Kentucky is one that I got my eye on. It's funny you say Hugh Freeze and Auburn as a team to surprise. Surprise. I think you meant it optimistically because I'm looking at it pessimistically. I don't know what in the hell we're doing here with Hugh Freeze. We're blowing up the coaching staff which were 2 quality coordinators. Now, I realize the offense was dreadful last year, and he's calling out basically his coordinator about half the season. I don't know what in the hell he's doing with Peyton Thorne. Peyton Thorne was awful for most of the year. Now, he looked good against Georgia, and he looked good against Alabama, which are probably the 2 games that Hugh Freeze did take over the play calling duties. And he'll be the first to let you know he called those games, and he let his Philip Montgomery call the other ones probably. But I don't know. I'm still shocked that Auburn went on the limb for this guy because I realize he won at Liberty, but who in the hell cares? You know what I mean? Like he beat Arkansas. That's basically what got him that job. And Sam Pittman, that program's not been right even before that, and that's going back 2 years. So is that how we're judging coaches now? Because you go and beat a struggling SEC team? I mean, Hugh Freeze is Gus Malzahn with baggage. That's what I call him, and that's what he is. And if they go 6-6, 5-7, which I'm not saying they will, but I didn't think they were going to get their ass beat by New Mexico State and Maryland either, but it happened. And it's year one. Maybe we forgive some of this stuff, but for a guy with his experience, particularly in this league, I don't think you can get away with 2 years of that. And that doesn't mean they're going to fire him, but I think he'll go into year 3 on a boiling hot seat if they don't make a bowl game. And I get it. He sits and points to, well, we had one hell of a recruiting class. I was focused on recruiting. Well, in the transfer portal NIL world, Chris, if you go 5-7, these 5-stars aren't sticking around. They're going to transfer in a heartbeat. And I think that's what will happen if Auburn struggles and they don't get some of these receivers the ball. And we know you don't just walk into the SEC and start, particularly at receiver in this league. So I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it goes at Auburn.
And that leads me, Mike, to this. I don't know that a blanket answer will apply here because each program is different. Each set of circumstances is different. But, you mentioned at a place like Auburn, maybe 2 back-to-back below the standard years can get you canned somewhere else like Arkansas or South Carolina or maybe Mississippi State, where it takes maybe a little bit more patience. But I mean, in this transfer portal NIL era, where to your point, you just don't have as long as you used to build a program because you start to struggle. Guys can hit the road quickly, and you have that negative momentum against you. It can take a toll. What do you think that window is for success for head coaches? I mean, again, it's hard to give a blanket answer, but I mean, do you feel like 3 years is typically the window? Do you think it should be 4? Should it be 5? Should it be 2? Like, how do you judge coaches in the SEC? Is it off based off which program they're at? Because obviously expectations are different at different places. It's a fascinating question, right? To what should be the timeline that a coach gets to get a program going?
Well, that's a hard one to answer, Chris, because I think it really just depends on the program. Like Kalen DeBoer, he doesn't have 3 years. I think they've got to be great immediately. If they go 7-5, they may fire him, and I think they probably should. As crazy as that, I mean, this is the greatest dynasty of all time. And again, they're not going to be a dynasty under DeBoer. I really don't think so. But we can't. The wheels can't fall off either. You know. Now, Jeff Lebby, he probably deserves 3 years, given the situation he inherited. A guy like Billy Napier, this will be year 3. If they don't make a bowl game, I'd fire his ass too, because this is Florida we're talking here. And it's clear that his approach, I mean, it seems like the old school approach where we're gonna I about said draft and develop. I mean, that's kind of what it is, but recruit and develop, which is fine. I mean, that for 100 years that worked in college football. I don't think that works anymore. When you got guys like Kiffin and Josh Heupel, and we've seen Shane Beamer, we've seen Sam Pittman kind of turning around immediately. Now, sustaining it, that's an issue Sam Pittman and Shane Beamer are having. And if Tennessee disappoints, we could throw Josh Heupel into that conversation this year too. But sustaining it, that's a different issue. But man, I think at the vast majority of SEC programs, short of maybe 3 or 4, I got to see something by year 2. And some of them, if Kirby Smart, God forbid, if he left tomorrow, it's got to be immediate. At LSU, I think it's got to be immediate. Mike Elko at A&M, I think it's got to be immediate. And that doesn't mean, win the SEC or anything like that. But I mean, you got to win. You got to win at least 8 games, I think, for us to know that you're a quality coach. And you can do it with the portal, things of that nature. You can turn over a roster overnight. So I don't think there are excuses anymore. And I know this is not quite what you were asking, but I think all these coaches, Chris, are going to be judged on playoff appearances, because there's about 8-9 programs in the SEC that think they deserve to be in the playoff, and they all gonna make it. So if you miss the playoffs 2 years in a row, I think you could potentially get fired at some of the higher echelon, which is about, like I said, 8-9 programs in the SEC. You better make it or come damn close on an annual basis. Otherwise, there's going to be hell to pay.
On that note, Mike, over under 2.5 SEC head coaches get fired after the 2024 season. What are you taking?
I always go over on fired because we got guys on a hot seat already. We got guys that may not seem like on a hot seat, but get on it pretty damn quick. I mean, this is wild, Chris. I mean, I can remember. 12 months ago, you could not eat, and I'm not saying Shane Beamer's on the hot seat, but I think a South Carolina fan will fight you to death if you said anything bad about Shane Beamer. Now, some of them, no, not many, but some of them would say, hell, I don't know if this guy can get us there. You know what I mean? Like, it turns quick. Like, he was a favorite son to wait and see. And Sam Pittman's an even better example. I mean, he was the toast of the town, and I think most fans were ready to move on from him until he hired Bobby Petrino. Coach O, I mean, you literally could not get a better fit than Coach O at LSU. Wins it, and then he wins a national championship, and a year later he's out. So we're crazy. We're damn crazy down here, Chris, but I love it because I love the passion. apathy is the worst thing in the world in this sport. So I don't mind the crazy, but we're a little too crazy down here. And you lose a couple games you're not supposed to lose, you'll find yourself on the hot seat in a hurry in the SEC, and it's only getting tougher with Texas and Oklahoma coming in here.
Mike, last thing, and I'll get you out of here. You mentioned we're crazy down to the SEC, so that means we look forward to things like spring football. I asked people, what's your favorite sport second to football? And people would say spring football, spring game. So how excited do you get for spring football and to start talking these top storylines? And, the spring game, it's a glorified scrimmage, but we do get a glimpse at a lot of these transfer portal guys, a lot of these incoming freshmen. So it's just around the corner. How pumped are you and Cousin Shane to check it out?
Oh, couldn't be more excited. You're right. The spring games, a lot of them are kind of ho-hum and don't honestly learn a lot from the spring games. Do like to see, like you said, transfers, young players, like to see how they look on the field. But to me, it's more about practices and scrimmages and getting intel from around the league. And I think that's more important than ever, given the massive player turnover, coaching turnover, and there's a portal window after spring. So you really got to find out where are these teams deficient, where do they need to add, things of that nature. So, yeah, I think more than ever, you have to pay attention to spring football to get a read because sometimes, you get a player in there, you think they're awesome out of the portal, and you come to find out they're not even close to competing at this level. So, yeah, every year we get excited about spring football, but I think it gets more and more and more important as this wild college football calendar, which they need to do something about it. But it adds emphasis on how important the spring football really is.
Mike, which fan base do you think you'll catch more grief from, Texas or Oklahoma?
The answer is always Florida for me. They hate me. So, but no, I'm already I'm already, quite public that I didn't even know this was that bold of a take, but everybody loves Sarkisian. So I'm sitting here saying, why in the hell are just so many people think he's a top 5 coach in college football? I realized they had a great year last year. They beat Alabama, so we crowned them. But yeah, Texas fans, they got it out for me already, and that's fine. I tell the truth, and A&M fans were after me when I questioned Jimbo Fisher. Now they all hate that man. You know what I mean? So they'll catch up to me if Texas disappoints this year. They'll be called for Sark's head, and I'm not even called for his head. I'm just saying let's pump the brakes on calling him one of the best in the game because he's not earned that.
Michael Bratton, a.k.a. SEC Mike of That SEC Podcast. He and Cousin Shane do a fantastic job talking all things SEC football. Mike, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Let's definitely do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Chris.